Nope, that's not me. Okay. All right, if we want to go ahead and take a seat, we'll get started with this meeting so we can get into the demo and the other activities and hopefully get out of here before any snow hits the ground. Welcome tonight. It's our November meeting, and I want to welcome all of our members that are here, and I don't see any guests or new faces. Ah, there's one. Your name? Fryam? Okay, well, great. Welcome, and hope you enjoy what you see, and come to another one and see more. Our agenda tonight, it will be going through the announcements. We'll also present the slate of officers for next year. And then we're going to have an enameling demonstration by Sue Bergstrand. And we'll take a short break with treats and some fellowship. And then we'll get back together to go through the November challenge, which was turn a human form based on a demo by Clint Stevens from last month. And then we'll go into the show and tell. So welcome everybody. And let's start out with our announcements. Let's see, KCWT members Sean McMahon and Anthony Harris are mentoring at the Liberty High School, or with the Liberty High School with their wood turning club. Interesting opportunity, and glad to see us reach out to the community and do some help for them. Also, we've got the 2022 member awards that will be presented in the December holiday party, so make sure you're there just in case you're getting one of those awards. Don't forget, I think Mike's still running around if you haven't hit him up already, but we've got a $1 sweepstakes tonight for a chance to win a gift certificate for a free bandsaw blade. If you aren't interested in the bandsaw blade, donate it for the club. We can always use more bandsaw blades. So, and it's always fun to win. So think about that. Check out our member mentors list. It got a little smaller because Effie has moved to Israel now, but we still got 2 members willing to mentor, and we've got another member ready to show you through the process of a pepper mill if you'd like. Right, Bill? All right. So thank you for our mentors. And if anybody else is interested to get on the 2023 list of mentors, I don't think it's been a big strain, has it, Phil? So it's not like you're constantly turning people down, but it's a great opportunity for our new members to get to know somebody, and as well as kind of go through some of the basics and maybe even specific projects that they might be interested in. That the mentor list actually has a kind of a spreadsheet of what their expertise is in. So check it out if you haven't yet. Let's see. I wanted to thank all of our members that participated. We had a great participation from our club over the past couple of months. We've turned over 1,000 tops for the Santa's Workshop event that's coming up this coming weekend. So I know it took a lot of people. I know the top guys really pitched in. We had several members that set up the blanks for us. That was very important in keeping that going. So thanks for everybody for their help on that. And please consider helping out at the Santa's Workshop if you haven't already gotten signed up. Let's see, Rob, I think I'm on the next page. Locating information, go to the website. That's the best place. KC Woodturners is the best .org. I'm sorry, KCWoodturners.org. Best resource to find club information. If you go down the panel on the left, you can find all kinds of information about upcoming events and dates and things that we'll be doing. Also, we've got the Wood Chips monthly newsletter. Keep an eye out for that. It'll have a repeat of the announcements. So if you missed anything from tonight, you'll get it then. Or if you really need information bad, you can always ask a board member and we'll try to find the information for you. Let's see. We need your help. Looking for some members still to be openers for the open shop. We still need a couple of backups for the 3rd and 5th Saturday. They wouldn't be the primary opener. They would be the backup for Jeffrey Bowman, who is our has taken over that opening spot. And Anthony and I have been taking care of the 1st and 4th Wednesdays as openers, but we'd really like to see somebody else step in if they can. So we've got those available. Our Wednesdays are 6 to 9 p.m. We aren't every Wednesday. I think I saw on the website it said every Wednesday of the month, but it's actually the 3rd Wednesday of the month we're off because that's the woodworkers meeting night. Let's see. Oh, just contact a board member if you might be interested in being an opener. We can kind of run through what it involves. It's not very involved. Rob Platt. Rob, raise your hand. He's our new AV guy, and he would love to have some help. Obviously, we've recruited some help and appreciate that, but he could always use more people to work the cameras, and he also would like to have somebody familiar with the process to back him up for future meetings, just in case he has some vacation or gets sick or something. He let me know that he was still breathing today, so I knew he was going to be at the meeting. I appreciate that. Mike Thomas, raise your hand. Mike, raise a high. Mike is always looking for people to demonstrate for the club. We've got summer and fall. He's done a pretty good job of getting our late winter and spring filled up, but summer and fall of 2023. So please consider showing the club a new idea or a technique that you come through over the next few months that might make a demonstration for everybody. Doesn't have to be real involved, doesn't have to be highly technical. But everybody likes to see new things. So if you come across something or have an idea, please see Mike, let him know. He's
you have a favorite professional demonstrator. Most of these people do want to use IRDs now instead of coming in person. So,
yeah, if you want to drop Mike a name of somebody that you'd really like to see on an IRD, he's the person that will get in contact with them and see what we could possibly schedule, right? Beth Ireland is a name that's come up that they said that has great presentations, and so Mike's going to try to get her lined up and see if we can get that happening by sometime early next year. Upcoming events. The big thing on my list here is our Santa's Workshop this Saturday and Sunday, November 19th and 20th. It'll run from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We've still got open slots in our Sign Up Genius, and as soon as our Sign Up Genius fills up, and if we still have people that are looking for opportunities to help out, we'll have you signing up on the Woodworkers Sign Up Genius, and they said they can handle as many people as we can provide them to help them out with different opportunities that day. Nobody can be Santa Claus. Oh, you can meet Santa Claus. That's true. Yes, this is true. I thought you said I could be Santa Claus. Okay. Oh, this is a really good community outreach event that's held in partnership with the Woodworkers Guild. Kids are smiling all day long. It's fun to see it happen. They'll build wooden trucks. They'll get to see Santa get signed off on their wooden truck, and then they come by and see us, and we drill a hole in the back of the truck to put a spinning top from our club. We'll also have club members demonstrating turning tops, as well as, if we can, we'll have another demonstration that'll probably be Christmas ornaments and things like that turning on it. It's a fantastic event, but we need our member participation. So like I say, if you haven't looked at the Sign Up Genius and you're thinking about doing it, please get your name in there so that we can count on you. I don't have to sign. I think we're set up for like 2-hour segments, aren't we? Yeah. So you're not, you don't have to commit for 2 days. You commit for 2 hours if you want, but talk to me, Wendy, if she ever shows her face again, or Sean, and we can answer any questions for you. Another upcoming event will be Anthony Harris is going to teach a 2-session ornament turning class this month, I think. Anthony, do you have the dates? No,
It's December.
it's early December.
I think it's the second. I don't know. It's on Saturday afternoon.
It'll be a Saturday afternoon.
First, second, or third. It's two of them. Saturday in the month.
Okay, in the very first of December. Okay. It's basically giving you opportunities. Okay, it's the 10th and 17th of December. I'm sorry, I just didn't have that info when I put this down. Okay, it's on the website, 10th and 17th. Great opportunity to make some holiday gifts. So please check it out. Let's see, 2022 annual KCWT holiday party will be Monday, December 12th at 7 p.m. So as opposed to our regular meeting, we'll have a holiday party next week or next month. We'll have a gift exchange for anybody that wants to bring a gift. They'll get to pull a gift and trade some projects that way. Also, don't forget to bring a few tools because we usually have a turning challenge. And I believe the format will be the same where we'll provide the meats and drinks and all the setups. And then what the club does is bring in desserts and sides for the meats. So more information from that will be coming to you. Finally, the election of the 2023 officers will be held during the holiday party in December, as well as announcement of the at-large board members will be happening. And last thing, let the board know if you would be interested in becoming an at-large board member. We're going to lose Wendy Lithgow this year. She really brought a lot of enthusiasm and energy into the board. I'd love to see that replaced with somebody. So at-large members don't have a whole lot of responsibility on a monthly basis. They are there to provide input, ideas, and usually get hit up for volunteering for things. But it's a great group. I've been around them for about 6 years now, I think. So we're pretty easygoing. Pretty loose run with me as the president. So finally, before I get to this next item, I wanted to there was a gentleman that stopped by whose name was Joseph Allen. He lives close to the shop up on 39th Street, and he's cut down a bunch of black walnut that he said it's good solid wood, and anybody that would be interested, he's given me his cell phone number. You can come by and talk to me if you'd like that. I'm also going to get some photos and send them to Kevin and get it out to the whole membership in an email. I'm hoping here over the next day or so. But it seemed like a really nice guy, and I think he was just looking for knew that the wood had some value to somebody, so he kind of kept a lot of it around. And it looked like there were some good chunks there if you were interested. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to present our 2022 slate of officers for the board. You're not going to see any faces that you don't recognize because it's the exact same slate of officers as we had last year. Now, that's not to say that somebody can't challenge or run against any of us. So if anybody has that desire, please let me know, because president is a fun job that everybody should try for at least a couple of years. Our slate is I'm going to go for another year of president because I just like people calling me Prez. Mike Thomas is going to be our vice president again next year. Our treasurer and longtime treasurer will be the same. It's going to be Kevin Neely, unless somebody wants to take over that function. Kevin won't argue with you. And our secretary, once again, will be Sean McMahon. So upon an approval or upon member approval by a show of hands, the KCWT, that is the 2022 slate of officers. So can I get a show of hands if everybody's okay with that slate? I think we've got a majority. Thank you all. Thanks for letting me do this one more year. Great. Thank you. All right. We're going to have a demonstration tonight by Sue Bergstrand, who's going to go over some of the techniques involved in enameling, as well as talk about how she's incorporating that into some of your projects, right? But before we get into that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Phil Sykes, who's going to remind us to always keep safety in mind and provide us a safety minute.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everybody. Who here did their homework? Who here remembers that I gave you guys homework last month? Anyone? Anyone? No. It's a pretty easy piece of homework. You might be able to do it right now. Just think, what is the swing of your lathe that you currently use or use most of the time? And that's going to be important here for a minute. Because what I want to talk about is holding material on the lathe real quick. I've seen a lot of videos and a lot of pictures and a lot of different people use very small holding devices to hold a very large piece of wood on the lathe. And the AAW, and most people recommend that you use a tenon or holding device that's 30 to 40% of the diameter of your piece. So if we're talking about, this is usually pretty common for like a bowl. When I got my lathe, it came with a faceplate that is this big, and I'm pretty sure it is 3 inches. Now, the swing on my lathe is 18 inches. So let's see. If this was 30%, I could turn something maybe 9 inches in size safely, as far as the AAW might recommend, and that might even be pushing it. So if you have a lathe that has 12-inch swing, 18-inch, 24, whatever you might have, you might want to invest in a larger faceplate that actually fits your size of your machine. And so this is a 6-inch faceplate. And so that is about, 1/3 of the capacity of my machine. So I probably wouldn't need a faceplate any larger than this, but I could definitely use one that's smaller if I'm doing a smaller piece. The other thing that I really see is everybody gets excited when they buy their first chuck. And that chuck usually comes with these tiny little jaws on it. And these guys are, yeah, the inside jaw on this right now is about 1 1/4 inches. So if we, multiply 1 1/4 by 3, we're going to get, what, 5 inches? Okay, 4.5. So this is great if you're doing really tiny bowls or things of that nature. So you want to think about not only buying a chuck, but also getting a chuck with the proper size jaws on it. So here's my bigger chuck that I have, and this has, okay, so these jaws are just under 5 inches. So really that's not even quite as large as I would want if I was going to try to max out my lathe, but I don't really max out my lathe. But this is a much better size for turning a 15-inch bowl or a 12-inch bowl or a 14-inch bowl. And it doesn't mean that the size of my tenon is going to dictate the size of my base of my piece. I can always make my base smaller. But at least when I'm turning it, I want to make sure I've got a good piece of material to hold on to. What I don't want to have is have a 3 or 4-inch jaw holding on to a 20-inch piece of material as it's flying around at 1,000 RPM while the camera is running, especially not, because we don't want to see what happens there. So if this is foreign to you or you don't know kind of the size that you should be holding your piece with, talk to somebody, talk to me, talk to Chris, talk to anybody who might be able to give you a little bit more info or point you in the right direction. And that's what I have for the safety minute.
Demonstration for tonight. And Sue, I don't know a lot about enameling, but I'm hoping I leave tonight and know a little bit more and interested in seeing what you got to show for us. So without further ado, this is Sue Bergstrand. She's going to show us some enameling techniques.
Okay. My mic on? Is my mic on? Oh, okay. I think the first question everybody has is, why are we doing an enameling demo at a wood turning club? But they can be included in pieces. If you do the lid of a box and you cut it out to accommodate something, you can put an enamel in there, glue it down with E6000. This one was cut to the same pattern, but has a little bit excess on the edge. I'll just clean that up with a file and it'll fit in just fine. I've also done pieces of pipe. You may have seen some of Sean McMahon's magic wands where he's included a ring like that. And you can get pipe in copper pipe in various diameters at the hardware store. So, enamel is glass on metal. If you go into a jewelry store these days and somebody tells you something is enamel and it's not 40 years old and it's repaired, it's probably resin. There are some low fire ceramic coatings that they're also using, but they do not wear as well as enamel does. In the late 1800s, there was tons of enameling going on in the jewelry industry, but they treated it all as a trade secret. So they would make their own enamels and not tell anybody how they made them. And they would have specialists working on this and not tell anybody else how it was done. And then in World War I and the Russian Revolution, we lost a lot of those people and a lot of that information. In the 40s and 50s, there were Americans in Ohio at the universities who were trying to rediscover some of the secrets of enameling. And at the point that I started in 1995, a lot of the stuff that they had come up with, which was very rigid and, oh, you have to do this and you have to have this thick piece of copper and all these things that wouldn't work if you didn't do them just right. So I learned those early on, and things have gotten a lot more experimental and looser, and we don't do it that way all the time anymore. If you're doing a great big piece, like you're doing tiles for internal home installation, yeah, you need a fairly thick piece of copper if you don't want it to warp. These were done with very thin pieces. This is enamel painting, by the way. This was domed slightly and supported well in the fire, and the edges are all together, so this could be framed with no problem. In another class, we didn't have all that stuff, so we enameled it flat, and it wasn't well supported because we didn't have the supports we needed, and it turned out like this, which is not a great look if you're trying to do a thousands of dollars chimney cover for a client. This is the piece that was in the photo for the ad. This is 26 gauge copper. It was domed. And the way doming is done is you take a dished out piece of wood and a piece that fits into it. And if when you're trying to do it with the big pieces and just push it down, it takes a pretty good whack with a hammer to get it down. Typically, I'll use a smaller piece and push it down. This is the first piece we'll be enameling tonight. And that gives me a fairly decent dome for what I'm going to do. You can turn these. Things to do. I've actually left the tenons on mine, so if I decide I don't like this dished out piece I like, this piece needs some work. So the fact that its tenon is still on it means I can go back and fix it. Now it used to be with the 26 gauge copper, you can cut it out with a pair of scissors. These are Joyce Chen Kitchen's shears. They're also sold through gardening catalogs, and they cut chicken bones and they cut little branches. and they cut 26 gauge copper like it was paper. And so now it used to be you would put enamel on the back and fire it, and you would put enamel on the front and fire it. And then one day I took a workshop with a woman who did large pieces all the time. We're going to be doing sifting here tonight. Normally when you sift, you should be wearing a mask. It doesn't work too well with the microphone, so we're going to fake it tonight, but I'm standing, so I'm further away from it. A lot of people sit very close. And when I'm sifting, I normally wear a glove so I don't get all that grit on my hands. Yes. Enamel starts, all enamels start out as a clear glass, and then they add various heavy metal salts to it to get colors and opaqueness. Well, cobalt is one of the colors it does blue. Copper does reds, greens, blues, turquoises. You just have to have the right oxidation state on it. And the glass has the same coefficient of expansion as the metal that it goes on. So the most common one that you see works on copper, silver, and gold. There used to be one that worked on aluminum, but nobody was buying it, so they stopped making it. And the secret that I learned from this person who did large panels was you don't have to do 2 firings to get the first base coat on. There is a Thompson liquid enamel, which is typically used for spraying or painting with a brush. And that's the kind of enamel that you'd see on washing machines and dryers. And the factories just spray it on, and then they've got huge traveling tunnel kilns that they put things through. And it settles really well, so you have to stir it up every time you want to use it. That's ground much finer than what you sift with. 325 mesh is about the smallest that they sift to when they grind, so it may be in that range. When you paint with enamels, you use the very fine 325 mesh. And when you sift, you're typically looking at an 80 mesh, unless you're doing something in very fine work and need to go to a smaller sifter. So, each brush. And let's set up a sifter for a black back, just because I have a lot of black. This is called Thompson Unleaded Grisaille Black. Grisaille is a style of enameling that was very popular about the 16th century. And they would do a large vessel with a black or a very dark blue background, and then they would paint in white and develop it with several layers so that you'd have 3-dimensional look in black and white or blue and white. They did all kinds of little figures and devils dancing around. They were doing a lot of church work back then. So this one, you paint on the liquid enamel, which is not really liquid, it's very gritty. And use that as your initial coat. And then you sift. And sifting should always be done with the surface parallel to the bottom of the sifter so that you get an even coating. And at that point, we'll be setting this aside to dry. And once that's dry, you can flip it over. Well, actually, we should stick it down a little more. When I first learned about enamels, it was like you used Clearfire straight, and then you used Clearfire 50%, and then you used, now they say like 1/10% solution, 10% solution is sufficient. And it kind of sticks the top layer down to what's below it. One of the old timers gave a presentation recently for the Enamelist Society, and he would do 5 layers and gradually stick them all down. And all the people are sitting there like, really? You go to that trouble? Okay, so now we're going to put this back. If you do a lot, I typically don't put it back in the original jar. The stuff that comes through, I put in a smaller jar for later. And I don't think I brought the black jar. And we take a piece of paper towel and clean off the gloves. And then you set this aside. Now, you typically cover your entire surface with something to be able to fold up and put away and not have to clean the table with great difficulty. It helps to keep the enamel in one place, but you use smaller ones for each of the colors so that you can keep them relatively clean. Now we have this one, which I had worked on earlier and is still shedding a bit, but we're going to put his top coat on him anyway. I dropped that one last night. That's why it's doing odd things. And we'll put some Prussian blue on the front of that.
You get pretty much any color you
There are hundreds of colors. There are certain colors that are very difficult to make. The copper reds tend to be on the orangey side, and they're more likely, I think, to be opaque. The beautiful transparent reds that you see, those are gold based, so they're expensive. And you don't waste those a lot. Now, with the top, you don't necessarily have to use the liquid enamel. You put this stuff on and rub it around to make sure you cover the whole top. And we find another one of these. And we sift some more. Now, one of the old bugaboos was you had to have everything absolutely dry before you put it in the kiln. That's one of those things that you don't have to be so careful with anymore. If you're doing cloisonne and you're wet packing where it's really, really wet, yeah, you better get some of the excess water off. But for the amount of water this has in it, it's not going to get real exciting. Now, these are clip-on, flip-up. Hopefully this isn't tied into the mic too much. If you are working around infrared a lot, it will cause cataracts. And so now for safety, they strongly recommend you get one of the welding glasses will do. Typically, people who are around kilns a lot use what was didymium. And we will pull this off now so we can put the other glove on. This little sucker gets quite warm, and you have to pick it up by the metal handle on top. And so I use a nice leather glove to keep it at a little bit of a distance. And I lift things in and out with a pair of long nose pliers. And right now we're going to have to wait while that warms up a bit because we've not been doing that. This can go up to 2000, but enameling you do about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is not your home oven. And you don't want to touch anything inside the kiln. You don't want to touch anything that just came out of the kiln. Any questions so far? Mm-hmm. No, powder coating, I don't think has much heat associated with it at all. It's sprayed on, or at least the stuff that I've seen has been sprayed on. And either there's something in it like epoxy that is mixed before it's sprayed and it just seals. There are some ceramic coatings that are heated to about 325 degrees Fahrenheit. They are not a true enamel. Mhm. Mhm.
You wear the mask that we talked about having the mask that you wear. But it didn't so that you don't blow stuff off of the project or so you don't.
Some of both, but the safety primary reason for doing it is this is ground glass, and if you inhale it, it never goes away. And here we have my enameling watch, which is set to 2 minutes. Depending on what you're firing and how big it is, you may need more or less than 2 minutes, but I find it easiest to leave the watch as it is and not try to reset the time. If it needs 5 minutes, you give it 2.5. I started about 1995. A lot longer than I've been turning wood. Now, when you first put it in, it loses temperature a little bit, and then it has to recover. And part of the reason I was turning the kiln up earlier was to warm things up so that it would recover quicker during the firings now. Yes. On both the top and the bottom. when it comes out of here, it will be bright. It's beyond cherry red. It's a orangey color. Yeah, if you're working with just glass, then you have to let it anneal with a slow cooling. With enameling, you pull it out and let it cool at room temperature. I do know of cases where it's been done where it was a slow cool, but it was a fellow who was enameling a commission for a copper pipe company, and they had these enormous pipes, and he enameled them in a ceramic kiln, and he had to put it in with a forklift and take it out with a forklift, and you couldn't do that hot. You had to put it in cold, heat it up, cool it down, and then remove it. If you want to get glass off the metal. The way they do crackle is that they get two kinds of enamel that are not compatible with each other. If you do a soft enamel as your first layer, and then you fire a hard enamel over it, it will tend to break up. Not the only thing that determines compatibility, but it's one of them. Ooh, that's being very strange, but it's, yeah, I was doing this last night and they were coming out orangey, but the blue enamel on the top now is quite shiny, which means it's done. The black enamel on the back is probably being weird, but we'll let it be weird. Now we let that cool. Now we were going to go on. This is going to be like the kitchen demo where we'll leave that alone and we'll come off to another one. So now we're going to put some of the blue back in its little container after we get the black stuff off of here. Mm-hmm. You can use stencils to separate the areas that you want to keep clean. You can wet pack it, which means you mix the enamel with water and a little bit of clear fire, and then paint it on with a small brush to get your lines clear. You can do multiple layers, but you always want to make sure you've got a background before you start separating things, because copper will oxidize like mad. And then you have to deal with the black stuff. Some people are just fine with having to go through Sparex pickling after each firing. I just as soon not do that. Now this red enamel, I did last night, so it has a back coat of black and it has a front coat of red, a dark red. And now we're going to dress it up with a piece of foil. you don't use aluminum foil on this because aluminum foil would not survive the temperatures. Precious metal foil is quite a bit thinner than the it quite a bit thinner than an aluminum foil or one of the heavy foils for industrial use, but it's quite a bit thicker than gold leaf or silver leaf. The trouble with the leaf things is when you heat them up a lot. Now this piece of silver foil has already had a few things punched out of it. And we're going to punch out a Christmas tree here. You can buy these little stamps that have shapes on them. You can also buy this one has a snowflake. This one's a maple leaf, much bigger. That's what's on this one. When you punch it, you need to support it between a heavier paper, layers of heavier paper, so that you don't just wind up shredding the foil. And then you have to get the 2 layers of paper off of it. And you have to figure out which way is up. And here we get our little paintbrush. And we spritz a little of this stuff in the bottom of a cup. Incidentally, you can buy these if you have any reason to want a lid like that on your piece. So you get that, you pick that up then. And it's going to be a little bit off center because it doesn't want to move. They don't always cooperate. And then you put it in for a short firing, because you want the surface of the enamel to melt a little bit to hold the foil down, but you don't want to get the whole foil to move. The whole oops, we gotta turn this on again. I've gotten used to having a bigger kiln that has temperature control, and you just go in and out and you don't have to look at temperature and see if it's changed. There's no reason to get all of the enamel hot again. It just takes longer to cool then. It does matter if you're doing something like the rings. This one I had just left it in for a minute to put the foil on, and that was okay. But then I put a little clear enamel over the foil to keep it from tarnishing, and I put it in the kiln and left it too long, and gravity won and things started to move this way. After that, you let it cool to the point where you can actually move it to another trivet, turn it upside down, fire it again, and yes. And I prefer to do that in the bigger kiln because it has a window in the door so you can watch if things are starting to move. This one, it's like, okay, we hope we've guessed the time right. The when you typically add a full layer of enamel and it's fully fired each time because you want the enamel to glom together as a single layer. If you have partial firings, it can start to crack off and pop off, which is generally considered not a good thing.
The frog you showed earlier, because that's got multiple floors on it. How did you do that?
The black was fired as the background. The frog is actually gold foil. I drew the picture on the paper I was going to cut from, and I cut that out by hand. And then that was fired at the 1 minute range. And then I put yellow enamel over the gold to protect the gold foil. And that was fired the 2 minutes because it needs to be a fully fired layer. And then the black spots on it are actually enamel paint, the very fine grit, which you mix with mineral oil to use as your medium. You have to have an oil medium that will burn off cleanly. If you use an oil that doesn't burn off cleanly, then you've messed up your enamel. Now you may run across things that suggest that cloisonné is a synonym for enamel. They'll have a piece with no wires in it at all, and they'll call it cloisonné because they figure people know that word. Cloisonné is a specific type of enameling that uses very fine wires. I did not do this piece. I bought it at auction, but you can pass it around and look at the fine wires that are embedded in it. There you put a base coat of enamel on. The wires are set onto the base coat and fired in, and then you start adding the colors with a paintbrush, and those are just water with a little bit of clear fire in it. And it generally takes several layers to fill them up. If you're going for a minimal time, they typically say fill it to a third of the wires at a time, so 3 layers. And then you can use a diamond sanding thing wet to smooth off the top and give it a nice finish. Depends on how quickly. Early on, where you just have 1 layer of enamel on each side, it cools fairly quickly. The thicker the enamel gets, the longer it takes to cool. I have a test pyrometer that I can use to check it. I haven't tested this one lately. I know if you change some of the parameters of the kiln that it changes the firing, because this used to have a different kind of switch on it, and the switch developed a stop, and I thought I had turned it off and it wasn't off. and it went too high and burned out the element. And I found a guy who repaired kilns, and he repaired it, but the element was a little bigger, and the ceramic fiber he used to repair the inside of the kiln with the new element in it changed its firing. So I used to have to take it up to 1700 on the pyrometer, and now I only have to take it up to 1500. It still steams a bit when you spray something on it. But we will take our transparent green here and I have a little spare. We only need a little tiny bit of green to cover this up. Yes. It'll be a transparent layer. When enamelists refer to a clear layer, they're usually talking about a transparent colorless flux. But in this case, we're using a colored transparent. Well, we're getting cool enough that I may be able to put this on. So we've added clear fire and such on there. It's not really a paste. It's, I mean, if you pick it up on the brush, it's little pieces of sand type thing. Sorry about the coughing, but I was digging things out of the back of the closet and met with rather more dust than I was expecting. You know, if you were turning these out for sale, you'd be much more careful about it. I'm just a little tree. Okay, now fire this up again. It had been long enough since I used this that I'd kind of forgotten about how long it takes to get it busy.
Is there an enameling club that like the Woodturners club?
Not in Kansas City. Wichita used to have one. But one of those things where the leading people passed away and no one picked up. And the Enamelist Society is an international organization, and it used to be the primary interaction was their biannual conference. So every other year they get together, and theirs is not like the AAW's in that they have a 2-day conference, but they have a 2.5 day workshop beforehand, or a group of them, and another group for 2.5 days after the conference. So it's more like a week that you're gone. And so that gives you an opportunity to get places. They move it around the country so that various people will have an opportunity to get there without a lot of travel. And there are local groups. There's one in Ohio, there's one in the Northeast. And then with COVID, the Enamel Society got very active in a way they'd never been before. And they were doing Zoom presentations on a weekly basis. And they were doing IRDs for enameling things. And people liked it so much that now they're continuing a lot of that, even though you can go to the conference once every 2 years. There are a lot fewer enamelists than there are woodturners. We typically have about 200 people at the conference, maybe 150 if people were concerned about travel like they were at this one earlier this year. But because the group is so much smaller, you know a lot more of them personally. So. Okay. So now well, the first part of the cooling goes quickly, but I mean, if you want to be able to put water on it, it's you got to get it down below 200 degrees. Now, I don't know if it shows up on camera. The green is thickest up near the top and it's thinner below. But we may call that colored. And then one of the things that's come up with the experiments recently, the Pentel Slicky pens and there's another brand of pen where the gold and silver metallics will actually survive firing. You put them on the very last firing, or the very last layer, so they sit on top. And then it's a short firing. You don't need to try to get it way below the level. And the mica powders that you can add to resin, a number of brands of those will also survive firing. So it's the last layer and you get the iridescence on top. If you try covering it with a clear layer of enamel because you feel like you don't want it to get scratched, that will not, the iridescent effect goes away.
So enamel is very durable item.
Yes. Yeah. Dropping it on concrete is not recommended. Yeah. They used to do a lot of enameled rings and they held up quite well until people did something inappropriate with them, like drop them on concrete. And I've had to repair a few of them for jewelry shops in the area. But when the rings were originally made, you would do the enameling and complete that, and then you'd set any stones that went with it, little tiny diamonds. They used to put a lot of those on. And the jewelry stores don't want to take the diamonds out when you go to repair it. But the stuff they would normally use to protect the diamonds messes up the enamel. So instead of getting a nice transparent green, you get this white opaque effect starting to happen. And so I've not volunteered for repair, but I know there was one ring that it was a man's ring and it had originally been blue enamel, and a jeweler had tried to repair it several times with resin, and he just wore it out repeatedly, and he finally had me enamel it, and it didn't come back anymore after that. No one's asked for it. Yeah, they tended to be, there was silver in a lot of them there. And there are enamels that will do steel. In fact, there are steel plates that have a ground coat on them. And then you can use the copper, silver, gold enamels over the top of that. Yes, that's a very fine silver wire. The background has to go on first. When I've done cloisonné, it's always been on silver, and both of the examples I have here are on silver. Because you put a clear coat over silver and you mount the wires in that, and then you can put transparents on it, and you'll get all of the reflectivity of the silver base plate that goes very well with the silver wires. The Chinese do a lot of opaque cloisonné work. They have factories and they're working on bronze, so they're not. Bronze doesn't give you a nice reflective surface in enamels anyway, so they just use the opaques to cover that up. And you can work on gold. There are gold cloisonné wires that one will see. But usually if you're seeing a gold surface, unless it's being sold by Cartier or somebody. I know Tiffany did gold orchids at one time. The metal is too expensive to just cover it up in enamel, so they'll do a silver background, a base layer of enamel, and then gold foil over it, and then start doing the cloisonné from on top of the gold foil, so you don't see the silver in the first layer of enamel at all. And a lot of the artistic enamelists, you can find their work at art fairs and in galleries. They'll just leave the background silver, use gold wires for the design, and then as they're building up blues and purples, the silver background reflects much better. If you have a gold background on them, then you're going to start getting the yellow plus the color. And they don't do white gold because the nickel doesn't work too well with that. There is a white gold made with platinum that they can enamel. depends a lot on how cold the air is. I used to have trouble at my studio's in my basement, and if I was enameling it like February and it was really cold outside and pretty cold in the basement, I used to have trouble with cracking there. Well, I think it's safe enough to try the gold and see if it'll stick here. Now we'll give that a short firing and see if it survives. It's a marker. It's a Pentel Slicky with metallic gold. They use them in scrapbooks and stuff.
Doing enamel work, do you set it up so that you can do several things all at the same time, or you put out working on this piece done?
It depends a lot on how much I have to do. I mean, when I'm doing trade pins for the conference where you make 30 of one thing, then I'll be working on multiples. If I'm doing a cloisonné piece where there's a lot of work that goes into it, I'll be working one at a time. Well, that doesn't want to go through there. Good. Yes. Martha Banyas. Martha does some very interesting pieces, but she'd rather experiment than actually produce something. Yes. I just don't have to monitor the temperature at the same time. We'll let that cool off and see how that does. And I punched out a snowflake to go on our blue piece, which has been sitting here cooling forever, so it should be fine. Surface, yes. Um, the enamel starts softening a few hundred degrees below the firing temperature. So it would be maybe 1200 degrees there, and silver fires over 1700. So it doesn't get real close there. Yes. Yes, we are not trying to melt the foil. Because if we got to the point where we melted the foil, we would have enamel running off the piece. If you get it hot enough, it becomes liquid and it will roll off. It's particularly a problem with the vertical surfaces because there's nothing to keep it from rolling off.
Some temperature then, sticky.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to watch glass blowers in action, but when they go to pick up a gather, they're going into liquid glass and they have to work very hard to keep it on the punty or on the blowpipe by spinning it. And then as they start to shape it, it's cooling down and it starts to hold its shape, but it's still plastic enough that they can form it into the shape they want it to be. And so we have a nice little snowflake on our blue now. And I can put a clear enamel over that to protect it from tarnishing, but I don't think we need to do that. So, any questions? Well, it's best to put them there. Yes. 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 And there are multiple kinds of clear glass. Going over a silver foil, you would have to use a flux for silver. Flux in this case means clear enamel. It doesn't mean anything to do with soldering. One of the things that silver is used for in enameling is that it colors the glass yellow or brown. And so if you just use the initial flux that doesn't have anything in it, you might get a yellowish cast to it. The flux for silver actually has a little blue in it to overcome the yellow. Yes. Well, it looks more colorless. You don't really see it as blue, but the yellow doesn't give it a not too nice tinge. I can still see a little of the gold marker there. I think I need to put a heavier coat on and fire it a little less. It'll hold up well. Well, if there are no more questions, then it's time for snacks.
Thanks, Sue, for showing us that new technique. But I'd encourage everybody to come up to the table and see and look at what she produced while we were sitting here looking. You probably get a better idea up close.
And you can see some of
Please.
the other pieces I have up, which I can explain what they are. What happened to the little box?
It's over there.
Oh, okay. We'll
So
put it back in its little box.
thanks to Dan and Linda, we should have a few snacks back there to go grab while we're getting through a short break. Let's do it about 5 or 10 minutes. Try to make this somewhat quick, and then we'll get right into our November challenge and our show and tell. But Sue,
We're going to ask you to to turn something that you could use to install an enamel in. That shouldn't be too difficult. Your inset could be a stone, a piece of wood,
old coin.
old coin. You don't have to learn to enamel to get to the challenge.
That include an old Chris coin?
Oh, Chris coin. Yeah, you can't get those into wood anymore.